Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I was at the community cleanup event, boots covered in dirt, wearing a pair of old jeans and a faded shirt. I was just trying to get through the afternoon, moving debris and clearing out an old foundation in this rundown part of town. Not glamorous, but someone had to do it. I was studying a set of old building plans, trying to make sense of a collapsed wall that no one could figure out. That's when he approached me. Quick thinking, he said, voice smooth, like he was speaking from a stage. Most people would have just given up. I looked up, ready to brush him off. But then I saw him, tall, sharp jaw, perfectly put together, like he belonged on a yacht. He looked out of place here, dressed in a crisp button-down and designer jeans. I figured he must have wandered in from the city with his trust fund. I raised an eyebrow. I don't give up. He smiled like I'd just cracked a joke, then leaned in closer to see the plans. You know your stuff. Civil engineer? Yeah, I said, pulling the plans back just enough to keep him from taking over the conversation. I've got a job to do. He didn't seem to mind, though. He wasn't here for small talk. He was here for more than that. I'm Kyle, he said, extending a hand. I run a few things for my family. It's a pretty cushy gig. I didn't know what he expected me to say. I wasn't impressed by family money. I'm not here for a tour of your family's empire, I said, shaking his hand briefly. His smile didn't falter. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you. I admire someone who's smart enough to navigate all this chaos without blinking. I didn't know what he was getting at, but it wasn't the kind of flattery I was used to. Most men I met talked about my looks or tried to crack some joke about my manly work, but he sounded like he genuinely respected what I did. I'll take that as a compliment, I said, standing up from the pile of rubble. But I'm here to work, not to talk about myself. Kyle raised his hands in mock surrender, still smiling. Fair enough, but you're good at it. Let me make it up to you. Dinner, my treat. I know a spot that's perfect for engineers. I didn't know if I should say yes. It was the kind of invitation that usually came with strings attached, but something about him made me pause. He wasn't pushing. He was just offering. Dinner sounds fine, I said, trying not to sound too skeptical. But I'll keep it simple. No fancy places. He chuckled, a real laugh that made me lower my guard a little. I'll make sure it's just right. No strings. Promise. I didn't believe him. But I agreed anyway. Something about him made me want to see where this would go, even if it felt like a bad idea. Kyle's family's house was exactly what I expected. A sprawling mansion with polished floors, walls of expensive art, and enough chandeliers to make your eyes water. His parents greeted me at the door like I was an invited guest, but I could feel the tension the second I stepped inside. They were cordial, but their politeness was sharp, like they were waiting for me to do something wrong. Kyle's mother, Margaret, was the first to speak. She was dressed in a dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and she gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You must be so used to being in those work clothes, she said, her gaze lingering on my jeans and the worn boots that had seen better days. You've got such strong hands, perfect for manual labor. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I forced a smile. I'm used to it. And I like the work. She didn't seem impressed, but then she moved on, ushering me to the dining room. The rest of the family was just as pristine as her, wearing outfits I'd only seen in magazines. There was a moment of awkward silence before Kyle's father, Richard, spoke up. So, you're in construction? He asked, though the way he said it made it sound less like a question and more like a dismissal. I imagine that's rewarding, if not particularly prestigious. Actually, I'm a civil engineer, I corrected, trying not to sound defensive. I design and oversee construction projects, ensure everything's safe and up to code. Richard nodded, as though that was some small consolation. Right, just construction. He smiled tightly, clearly not interested in hearing more. Kyle shifted in his seat, looking like he was about to say something, but then seemed to think better of it. He didn't defend me, not that I expected him to. This was his family, after all. They were his world, not mine. Dinner was a slow affair, with every bite feeling heavier than the last. I tried to steer the conversation towards safer topics, travel, favorite books, anything. But each time I spoke, the conversation seemed to drift back to my career. And each time, it felt like the walls went up higher around me. Margaret was the worst. Every time she spoke, it was laced with a thinly veiled critique. She asked if I'd ever thought about dressing up more, as though being clean and presentable was some unspoken rule I hadn't learned. Kyle was polite enough, nodding along, but he didn't step in, didn't defend me. I noticed him shifting in his chair, glancing at me but staying quiet. The night dragged on, and the air between us grew thicker. Kyle's sister, Carolyn, asked me about my family, and I could see her eyes narrowing as she did. Her tone was like she was already measuring me up, like she was trying to figure out where I fit into their perfect little world. After dinner, as we stood by the fireplace with drinks, I could feel the weight of their judgment. They weren't rude. No, that would have been too obvious. They just didn't hide the fact that I wasn't quite their kind of person. Kyle noticed me standing off to the side, a little too quiet. He came over and put a hand on my shoulder, his voice low. "Hey, don't mind them," he said softly. "They take time to warm up to new people." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. He was trying, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't new. I was just someone who didn't belong in their world, and they made it clear. "I don't know, Kyle," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "This isn't easy." He gave me a small, reassuring smile, though I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "I know, but they'll come around. They just need time." Maybe he was right. But at that moment, I wasn't sure I wanted to give them more time. Not if this was how it was going to be. It had been a year, and in some ways, things had settled into a rhythm. Kyle and I had our moments of tension, mostly around his family, but we were happy, or at least I convinced myself we were. Then, one evening, he took me out to a quiet spot near the water. The sunset was perfect, the sky streaked with colors I couldn't name, and everything felt right. He'd rented a small boat, and we sat there, drifting. The only sound was the soft splash of the oars in the water. I hadn't expected anything out of the ordinary. But then Kyle turned to me, his eyes wide with something that felt like hope, and before I knew it, he was on one knee. "I love you," he said, the words soft but clear. "And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" I don't know what I expected, but the proposal itself felt like a dream, real but surreal. I could hear my heart thundering in my chest. For a moment, it was just us, the world shrinking to that one question. I said yes. It was the happiest I'd felt in a while. Kyle looked at me with that look I'd seen before, like he saw something in me that no one else did. He made me feel special, but then the reality of everything else hit. The wedding planning. From the moment Kyle told his mother, Margaret was on the phone with me, eager to help. Her idea of help was taking over. She suggested an extravagant venue, a designer gown that cost more than my first car, and a guest list that looked more like a political fundraiser than a wedding. I wanted something small, something personal, a gathering of close friends, maybe even a quiet ceremony at the lake where Kyle proposed. But no, that wasn't going to happen, not with Margaret in charge. Every time I made a suggestion, she'd smile that tight smile of hers and say, "Oh dear, that's cute, but we're thinking something a little more grand." The worst part was Kyle's silence. He didn't speak up. He'd nod along to her ideas, agreeing that they knew best. I told myself it was just his family being his family, but the more I saw them take over, the more uncomfortable I became. One afternoon, we were sitting at a cafe to talk about the flowers. Margaret pushed a catalog toward me, and I opened it, half-heartedly flipping through it. "Kyle mentioned you'd prefer something simple. Let's see if we can upgrade that idea, shall we?" She casually turned the page to a display of extravagant centerpieces, towering arrangements with crystals and gold accents. I stared at the page, then looked at her. "Margaret, this isn't what I had in mind." She raised an eyebrow. "Of course it's not. But let me take care of it. You just focus on looking beautiful on the day." I felt my frustration simmering. I don't want to look beautiful on a day that doesn't feel like my day. I want a wedding, not a spectacle. She tilted her head, clearly unmoved. "Sweetheart, weddings are spectacles. People expect them to be impressive." I forced a smile. "I'm not doing this to impress anyone." "Well, you should." She laughed, but it didn't sound like a joke. "That's the only way people will remember it." I was about to respond when Kyle walked in, glancing at both of us before sitting down. He barely looked at me when he said, "Everything's fine, right?" I bit my tongue. Of course. But it wasn't fine, not by a long shot. The deeper we got into planning, the worse it felt. Margaret took over every decision, from the dress to the venue to the catering. Each choice she made felt more alien to me, like she was pushing me further and further out of my own wedding. And Kyle, he just let it happen. Every time I tried to assert myself, to say something that felt right to me, he brushed it off with a comment like, "Don't worry, they know what they're doing." I was beginning to wonder if I was marrying Kyle or his family. It felt less like a union of two people and more like a business deal. And I wasn't sure I wanted to be a part of it anymore. But I didn't speak up. Not then. I went along with it, hoping things would settle. But with every decision they made for me, the more I realized I was just the bride who wasn't allowed to be herself. I wasn't sure where I fit anymore, if I ever had. I met Margaret at a cafe downtown, a place that felt as expensive as her smile. The tables were tiny, the chairs high-backed and uncomfortable, but she was perfectly at ease, like she belonged. I tried to focus on the wedding details she wanted to discuss, but my stomach had been in knots ever since she called, asking to meet. I knew something was off. She was early, of course, and already had a coffee in front of her when I arrived. When I sat down, she pushed a folder across the table. "I thought we'd get some business out of the way before we dive into the fun stuff," she said, her voice sweet, but there was something colder beneath it. "You know, prenups are standard procedure for families like ours." I didn't need to ask. I already knew what she meant. I picked up the folder, flipping it open. The first few pages were the usual legal jargon, nothing I couldn't handle. But as I read further, the terms became clearer. This wasn't a standard prenup. This was a contract that heavily favored Kyle's family. It cut me out of any inheritance, any joint assets. If something happened to Kyle, I wouldn't be entitled to a thing. The house, the business, everything went straight to them. My life, my work, my contributions, all irrelevant. I felt my heart start to pound as I scanned the rest of the document, but I kept my face neutral. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. "Margaret," I said slowly, setting the papers down, "I'm not signing this. I'll have my lawyer review it first." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. "Of course," she said, but I could tell she didn't like it. "But you do understand, this is really just a formality. Something clean and simple for both sides, just in case. Kyle's family has a lot to protect." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "If it's just a formality, then why do I need to sign something that benefits only one side? I'm not doing that." She pressed her lips together, the smile fading, replaced with something more calculating. "Sweetheart, you know this is just how things are done. Kyle's father and I, we've worked hard for what we've built. The prenup ensures everything is protected." I leaned back in my chair, refusing to let her push me. "This isn't protection. This is control." She tilted her head slightly, as though considering her next words carefully. "I'm just trying to make things cleaner for you, dear. We've seen these things go badly before, and it's better to have everything laid out ahead of time." I wasn't an idiot. I've signed a standard prenup before, Margaret. The one I signed with my ex was clean and fair, but this isn't that. This is something else. Her hand fluttered dismissively in the air. "Oh, I'm sure. But Kyle's family is more complex, and it's in your best interest to be thorough." She leaned in closer, her voice low. "We wouldn't want any misunderstandings, would we?" I felt a chill go through me. "No misunderstandings, but I'm not signing it today." She gave a tight smile, then slid the papers back into the folder, her hands more deliberate now. "Take all the time you need. But just know, dear, this is really for your own good. I'm sure you understand the importance of protecting what's mine. And what's Kyle's?" Her eyes flicked to the ring on my finger as if to remind me where I stood in this equation. I couldn't hide my frustration anymore, but I kept it in check. I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "I'll let you know when I'm ready." She didn't try to stop me, but I could see her displeasure as I left the cafe. I didn't know if I was angrier at her or at myself for letting it get this far. As I walked down the street, my mind raced. I knew what I needed to do now. I couldn't just sit back and let them steamroll me. I needed to understand what Kyle's family was hiding, what they thought they could get away with, and I needed to do it without Kyle knowing. I wasn't going to let them dictate my life anymore. The call came late one night. My phone rang with Kyle's name flashing on the screen, and I answered before it could ring a second time. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "I don't know how to say this," Kyle's voice cracked, and I could hear the strain in his words. "My parents, there's a problem with their finances, they're in trouble, and if they don't get a large sum of money, they could lose the estate. The whole thing." I felt my stomach tighten. "How much are we talking?" "A few million," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how it got this bad. I've tried everything I can, but nothing's working. They're too proud to ask you, and I can't. God, I don't even know how to fix this. I was silent for a moment, processing. The estate, the family name. I'd heard Kyle mention their financial difficulties before, but this felt different, real, dangerous. I don't want to put you in an awkward spot, he continued, but they won't ask you for help. I know they won't. But it's bad and I don't know what else to do. I could feel the weight of his words pressing on me. This wasn't just about money. It was about their pride, their image, their entire existence. The thought of them losing the estate, the business, all of it. It wasn't just about finances. It was about everything they'd built, everything they were. I took a deep breath. Okay, I'll help. Kyle exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. You'll help? I rubbed my temples, trying to focus. Yeah, but I'm not doing this directly. I'll set up a financial trust, make it look like it's from a family contact or something anonymous. I don't want to embarrass them, but I'm not just handing over cash. I'm doing this on my terms. There was a brief silence on the other end, then a low chuckle. I knew you'd figure out a way. You're the only one who can think like this. I didn't answer. I didn't need the praise. This wasn't about saving face for his family. It was about doing what I thought was right. I'll get it set up tonight, I said. It'll take a couple of days, but you'll have it. Just make sure they don't know where it's coming from. Thank you, Kyle said, the relief in his voice palpable. I don't know how to thank you for this. You don't have to, I replied, cutting him off. Just don't let your family ever think I did this for them. Let them think it's a loan, a gift, whatever they want. After we hung up, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Instead, I felt nothing. The kind of emptiness that comes from knowing you've done something big, but you're not sure it's worth it. I wasn't just helping Kyle, I was helping his family maintain their image. And in the process, I was allowing them to stay blind to the fact that the person who'd saved their house was the one they'd been treating like an outsider. A week later, the payment went through. A few $1,000,000 into the trust labeled as a loan. The money was gone, but it didn't feel like a solution. It felt like an arrangement, a transaction. Then came the dinner. It was supposed to be a thank you for everything, or so Kyle said. We sat around a long, polished table, his parents and their closest friends all laughing, sipping wine, like everything was normal. Kyle's father raised his glass. To clever financial solutions, he said, the smile on his face too wide, too fake. We may have had a little hiccup, but we're back on track. No mention of where the money came from. No mention of the anonymous payment that had saved their entire empire. No thank you. Just the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, and the feeling that I was invisible. I stayed quiet, the wine in my hand feeling like lead. I didn't need thanks. I didn't even want thanks. But the way they acted, like they didn't even know what I had done, made me sick. I didn't belong in that world, and it was becoming clearer every day. Kyle caught my eye across the table and gave me a reassuring smile. I nodded, but the ache in my chest didn't go away. It was there, settling in deeper each time I had to swallow my anger, my frustration, my sense of being used. I stayed quiet because that's what I was good at. But inside, everything was shifting, and I wasn't sure I could keep quiet for much longer. The morning of the wedding, everything was supposed to be perfect. I stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, my dress hugging me in all the right places. But it felt like armor more than anything else. I wasn't nervous. I didn't care about the ceremony, not really. I'd already signed the papers, already gone through the motions. But the way the day had unfolded so far, with every detail feeling more like someone else's dream than mine, made the whole thing feel hollow. As I was fixing my hair, Kyle came in, looking sharp as usual in his tux. He was smiling, but there was something about his expression that didn't reach his eyes. You okay? He asked, reaching for my hand. I'm fine, I said, not meeting his gaze. It's been a long day already. Yeah, he said, stepping closer. But this is it. We're doing this. Finally. His words should have been reassuring, but they didn't ease the knot in my stomach. I wasn't sure what finally meant anymore. Was it finally his family's way of making sure I fit in? Or was it finally me resigning to whatever they'd planned for me? I didn't have time to think about it, though. The ceremony was about to start, and as we walked to the venue, I noticed how different things were, how carefully orchestrated everything felt. The way his mother moved, directing the staff with the ease of someone used to having control. The way his father stood at the altar, already acting like this, was all part of the show. And then there was the seating chart. I tried to keep my head down as I entered the reception hall, but it was impossible to miss. Kyle's family had moved my friends to the far end of the room, placing them at a table tucked in the corner, almost as if they didn't want them there. My family was seated a little closer, but even they weren't in the right spots. Meanwhile, Kyle's family and their guests were front and center, perfectly framed under the chandeliers. I didn't bring it up to Kyle. He was busy mingling with his parents, his brother, and the rest of the guests, acting like everything was normal. I didn't feel like making a scene. "Don't worry about it," he said when I finally mentioned it later. "It's just how things are done. My family has their own way of organizing things. It's not personal." I nodded, though every word he said felt like more of the same. He didn't get it. It was personal. It always had been. The ceremony itself was no better. As I stood next to him at the altar, I could feel the eyes of his family on me, dissecting, judging. It wasn't just the glares from his mother or the way his father's eyes flicked over my dress like it was nothing special. It was the way they whispered behind their hands, too loud to be discreet. "She's not like the others," I heard his sister say, loud enough for me to catch. "Not really a bride. She's too strong." The word hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't react. What was I supposed to do? Argue with them in front of everyone? Let them see how much it hurt? I held it together. I always held it together. After the ceremony, during the reception, things only got worse. Kyle and I stood together as the toast started, the clinking of glasses cutting through the air like a warning. His father, the first to speak, raised his glass and made some congratulatory remark about family, about how lucky we were to be together. But when Margaret stood up, her smile wide, her eyes colder than ever, I knew it was coming. "To my son and his beautiful bride," she said, her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm so glad to see you two finally settle." She looked at me then, and I could practically hear the unspoken judgment in her words. "Some people marry for love, others marry well, for other things." I froze, but only for a second. My stomach churned as her words hit their mark. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on me, waiting for a reaction. I took a breath. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not anymore. "Actually, Margaret," I said, my voice calm but sharper than I intended, "the gold digger you're referring to is the one who made sure your family didn't lose their home to foreclosure. You're welcome." The room went silent, the laughter dying in an instant. I felt Kyle's hand tense on mine, but I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I was tired of pretending. The silence in the room was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. Kyle's father's smile faltered, and even his mother, usually so composed, looked like she'd been slapped. I could see Kyle's eyes on me, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. But at that moment, I didn't care. They were finally hearing the truth they'd been too blind to see, too proud to acknowledge. "Thank you for the toast, Margaret," I added, turning back to the table, the weight of the room still heavy on my shoulders. I wasn't looking for an apology, but I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore, not even on my wedding day. The rest of the night passed in a blur, and though no one mentioned it again, I could feel the tension between Kyle and me grow. He didn't speak to me much after that, and when he did, it was always in hushed tones, like he was afraid someone might overhear. But the silence in the room after my words, that stayed with me. It was like a weight lifting, something I hadn't known I was carrying until it was finally gone. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to them, not to me. The morning after the wedding, I sat in front of my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I was done. The whole thing, Kyle, his family, the lies, the manipulation, had gone too far. I wasn't some pawn in their game anymore. I wasn't going to let them use me to keep up their perfect little facade. I logged into my email and opened the message I'd been drafting for days. "Please initiate an account freeze on the following assets, including all trust funds and investments associated with the Peterson family. I am no longer comfortable with their access to these funds. This includes any real estate holdings, joint assets, and the family's financial accounts." It took everything in me not to second guess. I hit send. Within an hour, I got a confirmation from my lawyer. Accounts frozen. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. It felt almost too easy, like something I should have done a long time ago. For once, I was the one in control. The panic started not long after. I could hear the chaos in Kyle's voice when he called me, barely a few hours later. What the hell did you do? He yelled into the phone. My parents are freaking out. They can't access any of the accounts. Bills are piling up. Payments are missed. The estate's mortgage isn't getting paid. I stayed calm. I had expected this. I wasn't about to back down now. I didn't do anything, Kyle, I said quietly. I just protected myself. I'm not going to sit back and let them walk all over me anymore. You can't just freeze everything. His voice cracked, panic seeping through. They're going to lose everything. You're making this about revenge. Revenge? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. No, Kyle. This is about survival. You don't get to humiliate me over and over again and expect me to just sit there and take it. I'm protecting myself. I'm not your family's damn ATM. I could hear his breathing get heavier, and for a second, I thought maybe I'd pushed him too far. But then he spoke again, his voice dripping with frustration. You don't understand. This isn't just about the money. This is their legacy. This is their entire life. They built it all, and you're just going to... He cut off, breathing hard, clearly trying to control his emotions. I didn't give him the chance to finish. They built it all, Kyle. With what? Your money? Your connections? The same money they didn't hesitate to take from me, with no thanks, no acknowledgement? Kyle was silent for a moment, and I thought I heard him trying to find the right words. I didn't need him to say anything. I had already made my decision. You're right about one thing, I continued, my voice low and steady. This isn't revenge. It's just me finally taking back control. He hung up on me after that. I didn't call back. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out. And even if he didn't want to admit it, I knew it was eating at him. In the days that followed, Kyle's family's perfect world began to crack. The first sign was the way his father reacted when the mortgage payment didn't go through. There were frantic phone calls, followed by meetings with the lawyers, the same lawyers they had been using to tighten their grip on everything. But the money was gone. The accounts were frozen. There was nothing they could do. Then the stories started to leak. First, it was the whispers, someone mentioning that an anonymous source had bailed them out of their financial mess. Then came the spin. Kyle's family tried to frame it as a generous donation from a family friend who wanted to remain unnamed. But the truth was already starting to surface. People were putting the pieces together. My name came up in hushed tones. It didn't take long for the rumors to spread, and when they did, Kyle's family scrambled to control the narrative. They tried to spin it as if they'd been fortunate to have someone come through at the last minute, but it didn't stick. The more they tried to lie, the more people saw through it. The truth was that I'd saved them. I wasn't just some family friend or anonymous benefactor. I was the one who'd kept their empire from crumbling, and they had the nerve to pretend they didn't know it. I didn't care anymore. Let them squirm. Let them try to turn it all into something palatable for their social circles. None of it mattered to me. Kyle didn't call. His family didn't call. I didn't care. The walls they had built around me had come crashing down, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It was no longer about them. It was about me. I had done what I needed to do. The world had turned, and I was finally in control. The fallout was swift. It didn't take long for Kyle's family to spin their version of events, but what they didn't realize was that the truth had already taken root. The more they tried to control the narrative, the more they dug themselves into a hole. I stayed silent. I didn't have to say a word. They did all the talking for me. Ben's sister, Carolyn, was the first to take to social media, her fingers typing out an angry rant accusing me of using Kyle for his money. She's a gold digger, she wrote, pretending to be a hardworking woman when all she's doing is leeching off my brother's family. I hope he sees through her soon. Her post was full of venom, and the comments section quickly filled with more of the same. I scrolled through, my stomach tightening with each line. But I didn't respond. Not even a like or a thumbs up. I just kept scrolling, knowing that it was only a matter of time before people started to realize the truth. Then came Kyle's mother. She took to her own page, posting Bible verses about betrayal and forgiveness. Sometimes those closest to us hurt us the most, she wrote, followed by a long string of verses about loyalty and trust, praying for peace in our family and for the strength to forgive those who have wronged us. I stared at the post, shaking my head. The hypocrisy was almost too much to bear, but I didn't respond. Not a single word. Let her do all the talking. Let her keep lying. I knew the truth, and it was becoming clearer to others as well. A few hours later, an old family friend, someone I hadn't seen in years, Arthur McAllister, A retired lawyer who had worked with Kyle's family commented on Margaret's post. "Margaret," he wrote, "I believe you're forgetting something important. The woman you're calling a betrayer is the same one who stepped in when your family almost lost everything. She saved your house. I think it's time for you to acknowledge that." The silence that followed was almost deafening. No one expected Arthur to speak up. No one expected him to be the one to drop the truth bomb in the middle of their carefully curated lives. But it didn't end there. People started to ask questions. They started to look into the stories they'd been fed and realize that something didn't add up. And then there were the messages. Slowly, they started trickling in. People I hadn't heard from in years, friends, coworkers, even acquaintances from back in college, reached out to me, offering support. "You didn't deserve any of this," one message read. "I've always respected your work ethic. You've got more strength than anyone I know. Don't let them make you feel small." Another, "You did what needed to be done. Don't let them rewrite your story." And then there was the message from my aunt. "You've always had more integrity than anyone in that family. I'm proud of you. You did what they couldn't. You showed them what real strength looks like." For the first time in months, I felt seen. Not just as the woman Kyle married, but as me. The woman who had made the hard decisions. The woman who had taken control of her own fate. It wasn't about the wedding anymore. It wasn't about them. It was about me standing up for myself. The calls from Kyle came next, one after another, each one more frantic than the last. I didn't pick up. I wasn't interested in hearing how sorry he was, or how he had been blindsided. He didn't get to make this about him anymore. But then, on the fifth call, I answered. "Hello?" My voice was steady, calm, unlike the whirlwind in my chest. "Kyle," he said, his voice cracking, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not standing up for you, for letting them treat you like that. I didn't know what to do. I should have done more, but I didn't. I should have protected you." I felt a pang in my chest, but I kept it buried. "It's too late, Kyle. It's been too late for a while." "No, please, just listen," he started, but I cut him off. "You don't get to make this about you anymore. You don't get to apologize after everything your family has done to me. After all the times they've disrespected me, ignored me, made me feel like I was nothing. I'm not a victim here. I'm done." He was silent on the other end, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd finally gotten through to him. But then he spoke again, his voice shaking. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "I don't know how to make things right. I can't." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I knew what he was really saying. He wasn't ready to lose me, but he wasn't ready to choose me over his family either. And that was something I couldn't fix. "I don't need you to fix anything," I said. And for the first time in our relationship, I felt the finality in my words. "I need you to leave me alone." I hung up before he could respond, and for a moment, everything felt eerily quiet. But in that silence, I knew I was making the right choice. A few weeks passed, and the dust finally settled. Kyle was gone. It wasn't a dramatic exit, just the slow fade of someone who was too afraid to stand up for what was right, too wrapped up in their family's expectations to fight for me. He moved out, taking a few things, but leaving behind most of his stuff, like he thought he might return one day. I didn't change the locks immediately, but the day after he left, I finally did. I stood at the door, turning the key, hearing the click of finality echo in my chest. The apartment felt emptier now, but it also felt mine. I didn't need anyone else's approval to live here, to breathe here, to exist. I'd been quietly supporting Kyle's niece and nephew through their school fees, but I'd stopped making direct donations to the family account. Instead, I funneled the money through anonymous channels. They didn't deserve to know I was still helping them. They didn't deserve anything from me, but the kids were different. They didn't ask for this mess, and they didn't deserve to carry the weight of their family's mistakes. So I kept it up, just out of sight. One evening, I invited my aunt over for dinner. The kids came too. I didn't make anything fancy, just a simple meal, the kind that felt like home. No drama, no pretenses, just the quiet hum of a peaceful night. The evening was easy. I didn't feel the pressure of anyone looking over my shoulder, judging my every move. The kids laughed, my aunt told stories about her own childhood, and for once, I felt like I could just breathe. Later, after the kids were in bed, I sat down at the table with a cup of tea. I hadn't checked my mail in a few days, so I was surprised to see a letter addressed to me from Emma, Kyle's niece. It wasn't something I expected. I opened it slowly, the paper crackling between my fingers as I unfolded it. "Dear Aunt, I know you don't like being called that," it started. Thank you for everything you've done for me and David. I don't know what we would have done without you. I admire your strength and your kindness more than you know. I know things have been hard, but you always stand up for what's right, even when no one else does. I wish I could be as brave as you. Thank you for believing in us. I let the words sink in. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly. I wasn't crying out of sadness. I was crying because for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. I'd spent so much time being dismissed, ridiculed, humiliated. But Emma, this kid, she saw me. She knew. I put the letter down, staring at it for a long time. I'd fought for so long, fought for what I thought was the right thing. But now I knew. This was the right thing. To stop fighting battles that weren't mine to fight, to finally take control of my life, my money, my choices. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of what people thought or how they'd judge me. I didn't need their validation, their approval. I had myself. I looked out the window, watching the soft glow of the streetlights flicker in the distance. For the first time, I could see the future clearly, a future that was mine. No more apologies. No more explanations, just me, living on my own terms.